140,000 years ago, 138,000 BC, 136,000-ish years before anything that you or I would recognize as what we call human culture, there was a ceremonial burial for someone that was not human. The main character of that story, or the most interesting character perhaps of that story, is the subject of our video today. We have an article titled "The Ancient Child Wasn't Fully Human. Scientists now believe she was something else," from Daily Galaxy by Melissa Ait Lunas. I have no idea how to say that. This is a fragment of a skull, a 140,000-year-old skull discovered in Skull Cave, kind of ironic, on Mount Carmel, Israel, may represent one of the most significant findings in human evolutionary history. According to a new anatomical analysis, the cranium likely belonging to a 5-year-old girl whose parents came from two separate human species, Neanderthal and Homo sapiens. So here I have brought up a Neanderthal skull and a Homo sapiens skull. This is what our craniums look like, most of us. This is the the Neanderthal cranium. Even more stark when viewed from the side. This is a Homo sapien skull. This is a Neanderthal skull. Look at all of that extra space for glorious brain capacity. Neanderthals are often thought to have less intelligence than do we, often thought to have less culture than do we. I don't know that that is necessarily the case. They had a whole lot more brain capacity, and one of the things is that their body sizes were basically the same size as ours. So one of the things that kind of they say comes out to determine how intelligent an animal is basically how big their brain is in correlation to the heft of the body. That brain is responsible for telling what to do. These Neanderthals were basically the same size as us, but had very large brains, very large brow ridges as well. This is a facial reconstruction for a Neanderthal woman. Looks a whole lot like someone that I used to date. Not going to say who, Amanda, but this is what this girl would have grown up to look like, they think. And look, this is something very important too for what we will be talking about. The necklace here. Oh, it just happens to be someone wearing a necklace and a feather in their hair. No, this is absolutely something that they believe about Neanderthals, that they had the culture and they did have jewelry. So it's very difficult to convince me that they were less intelligent than us or very much less intelligent than us if they had jewelry on them. What is it that caused Neanderthals to fall away while you and I kept evolving? Our generations carried through the hallows of time. Well, it could be any number of things. Perhaps Neanderthals were more peace-loving individuals, whereas we were a warring type, and we took them on. Or maybe there was some type of disease to which the Neanderthal individuals were more susceptible than us. They had a weaker immune system towards, for example, smallpox, etc. Humans did not, or Homo sapiens, I guess I should say, did not. Clues hidden in ancient bones. First unearthed in 1929 during early excavations at Skull Cave, the skull was one of many remains recovered from the site, which included 7 adults, 3 children, and various other bones representing a total of 16 hominins. These remains were historically classified as Homo sapiens. However, recent investigations suggest that the classification may have overlooked significant hybrid features in at least one of the individuals. So, to say that they overlooked Neanderthal characteristics in one of the individuals does kind of beg the question. This was a Homo sapien burial site, it seems. Did Neanderthals travel in groups as large as Homo sapiens? Well, I did turn to ChatGPT to ask this question. What do we know about Neanderthal group size? Small core groups. Most evidence suggests that Neanderthal bands, the basic social unit, were usually 10 to 30 individuals. This comes from the size of cave and rock shelter sites, hearth distributions, and genetic diversity studies. Larger social networks. These bands were likely part of wider networks connected to groups maybe of 100 to 150 individuals total, who met occasionally for trade, mating, or seasonal hunting. This echoes of the Dunbar's number idea. Humans tend to max out at a stable group of around 150. So it seems that the social apparatus in the Neanderthal brains was probably right around the same type of social apparatus that you and I carry with us. Genetic evidence, ancient DNA studies from caves in Siberia and Spain show low genetic diversity, which points to small, isolated groups, sometimes even under 20 people. So, while they had the capacity to know groups of 100 to 150, just like you or I do, probably their inner circle was smaller and there was inbreeding among those groups, keeping the DNA diversity low. The girl's skull exhibits a mixture of traits typical of both modern humans and Neanderthals, leading researchers to hypothesize that her parents belonged to separate species. This analysis, led by paleoanthropologist Israel Hershkovitz, centers on morphological indicators that cannot be easily attributed to single known hominin lineage. Hershkovitz and his team argued that this blend of anatomical features points to interbreeding between distinct human groups far earlier and more intimately than previously assumed. I have long thought that hybridizations were not viable. This is a statement that's very confusing to me, and I continue to think that they were mostly abortive. This could be true, but I don't know that we have any real reason to believe this based on something that I'm going to talk about in a moment. This skeleton reveals that they were nevertheless possible. Again, we're going to get to this point, but I can't imagine how someone this close to this type of work has these thoughts, even though this little girl lived only 5 years, explained Anne Dambricourt, Malas at the Institute of Human Paleontology in France. They were obviously possible. It was obviously possible to interbreed with Neanderthals, as most of us have Neanderthal DNA. From Google, most humans of non-African descent carry on average 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA, with the exact percentage varying by region and individual ancestry. This genetic material resulted from interbreeding between early modern humans and Neanderthals outside of Africa, and it can influence various traits in present-day populations, such as aspects of the immune system, metabolism, and even physical features like skin and hair. Obviously, it was possible. It happened. We have the genetic proof. The article continues. Earliest cemetery sheds light on burial practices. What makes this discovery even more remarkable is its context. The girl's remains were found within what may be the earliest known cemetery, suggesting that complex burial customs existed long before previously documented. One thing that is interesting about this is that we have Homo naledi was discovered in Africa maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more than 10 years ago, but it was a new species of hominin that they did not know existed. And the interesting thing about that is this was prior to the evolution of Neanderthals, and this individual was in Starlight Cave, I believe it was called, and was assumed to have been buried, ritualistically buried, We are talking rungs ago on the scale of human evolution. And at a time when they had no idea there was ritualistic burials, with species of hominins that they had no idea used ritualistic burials. But way that the individuals the way that the individuals found that species, the bones of it, the fossil of it, was so meticulously deep in a cave that they think it was actually dragged there by other members of its species and buried, as opposed to that it went down there and died. There were other things uh, that suggested this, I believe, but I don't remember exactly those details. One thing that is interesting to think of, that is a humanizing thing to realize: 140,000 years ago, it's hard to imagine these individuals as human, right? 140,000 years ago, when all of our schooling tells us that human civilization goes back just 6,000-ish years, right? To 4,000 BC or so, is that all that time ago, they had the same hardware that you and I do. And they had all of the time in the world that wasn't used for hunting and keeping warm. Of course, they had ritual. Of course, they did things as groups and learned things together. But it's interesting to ask, how did these people die? Right? To imagine that, how these people ended up dying, humanizes them. Maybe sort of a creepy question to ask, maybe a bit off base, but these people died and were ritualistically buried. How did they meet their end? Well, one of the things that I love to do when making videos about this type of topic, deep time topic, is to go over some of the animals that were around back then that are not now. This is a tiger, basically a saber-toothed tiger. And this would have been a nasty sucker around the Israel area all that long ago. Scimitar-toothed tiger, something like that. But I don't remember exactly what it's called. But very scary, long-legged for a tiger, a big cat. They were built for endurance, and there was no running away from them. These suckers would have had to have been fought off by multiple individuals, because just one of us was not going to take them down. Then there was the question of cave bears. This is the size of a cave bear. These guys are extinct, but as this individual was buried in a cave, you can imagine that we probably had some pretty nasty neighbors. Interestingly, not so long ago, there was a mummified, I believe this is a cave bear. So most of the articles on it weren't exactly specific. They said prehistoric bear. Mummified in Siberia. Now, hopefully, he's not just hibernating, right? Because that would be a very gruesome room. Look at that. We have full fur and all an ancient bear. Fascinating type of thing. The article continues, "We do not know who buried this child, whether this place was chosen to bury the corpse or was that of a single community, or whether communities from different lineages, but which coexisted and established contacts or even unions, shared rights and emotions," said Molasse. The presence of an organized burial site also challenges the notion that ritualistic practices were exclusive to modern Homo sapiens. If the child was indeed a hybrid, then both Neanderthals and early modern humans may have shared symbolic behaviors, including structural burial, indicating a deeper cognitive and emotional capacity than often credited to early hominins. Again, we had the same hardware. We had the same size of brain. Now, perhaps structurally something was different, right? Was there structurally something around 6,000 years ago that evolved in the human brain that gave us the culture that we have today? It's possible, but I think that it's highly unlikely. The way that the brain is segmented, would there have been one thing that evolved across entire swaths of the globe that made something like writing pop up in different civilizations basically simultaneously? No, no. We did not evolve a mechanism in the brain instantly across the globe. So these things go back way deeper in time than we have any record of. And that is interesting. Is there somewhere some treasure trove of Neanderthal writing that we have yet to discover? Of writing or other cultural artifacts from Homo sapiens from 80,000 years ago that we have not found? Did these people have religion? We know that they had ritual, symbolism, and cared for their dead. Ritual, symbolism, and they cared for their dead. You're only scraps of ideas away from an entire constructed religion if you have people who share all of those things. The article continues, new discovery blows up the timeline. This case opens new questions about the timeline of geographic overlap of different human species. While genetic studies have long confirmed that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens interbred, particularly in Europe and parts of Asia, this skull presents physical evidence from the Levant, a region already known as a vital migratory corridor. Given the age of the remains and the anatomical findings, the discovery may prompt a reassessment of the biological and cultural interactions between species during the Middle Paleolithic period. These are questions that may never be answered. We have to be honest. They may never be answered. But the idea that they could be should be enough to keep us going and searching until we find them. These questions: what culture did Homo sapiens and Neanderthals have, and how much of that culture overlapped? What ideas, what languages did they have and or share? Where were their settlements? Even if they were migratory, even if they did follow seasons from warm to cold or cold to warm, whether they felt that they were chasing the warmth or running from the cold, where did they stop along the way? Did they build? Did they build cities? It is likely, in my opinion, that anything they built would have been from wood. Probably not stone. Where could we find that type of construction? How far back does it go in our species to build with wood, with lumber, with sticks, with tree trunks? When did construction from rock begin? I think that it was lumber before rock, because I think that when you're looking at safety, if your rock structure is not sound and one of those suckers comes down on your face, it's a very bad evening. However, at this time, it seems many people were probably living in caves. What kinds of setups did they have inside the caves? It would not have just been the cave floor, would it? Would they have put down skins beneath them? Would they have hung skins outside of the cave? Probably not, because of ventilation, right? They were probably building fires in these caves. It's just interesting to think about all of the small details that we don't really have access to, perhaps ever knowing. But anyway, that is what I have for this video. If you like or appreciate this sort of thing, this is in an archaeology playlist here on the channel. This is one of the things that I cover on this channel. So hitting the subscribe button, make sure that you come back for more of those videos. And if you want to help me out, hitting the like button really does that. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.